This program is provided by Universal Genesis.
I want you to do something for me. Just humor me for a second. Close your eyes.
Unless you're driving, of course.
Right, yeah. Please keep your eyes open if you're behind the wheel. But otherwise, close them. And I want you to conjure up an image of Karl Marx. Dig into your brain and just pull up that mental picture. What you see.
I mean, I think I can predict this with about 99% accuracy. You're seeing the icon.
Oh, absolutely.
You're seeing the massive, bushy gray beard, the wild, unkempt white hair, maybe a stern, slightly intimidating expression. He's probably sitting in some dusty, dimly lit corner of the British Museum in London, looking ancient, writing Das Kapital, you know, the quote-unquote father of communism.
Exactly. That is the image burned into our collective consciousness. It's the statue in the park. It's the picture in the high school history textbook. But for this deep dive, I want to completely shatter that image. I want to take a sledgehammer to it. I want you to picture someone completely different.
We really need to rewind the clock significantly for this one.
We do. Picture the year 1842. We are in Cologne, Prussia. Picture a 24-year-old man. He is clean-shaven.
Not a whisker on his face.
Right, totally barefaced. He's wearing a sharp tailored frock coat. He's energetic, maybe a little arrogant, holding a glass of wine in a tavern and just debating philosophy until 3 in the morning.
And crucially, this man is not a communist.
No.
If you called him a communist to his face in 1842, he'd probably laugh at you. Or, knowing him, he'd write a very scathing, very public editorial about why your definitions are just sloppy.
That's the twist here. He's a radical liberal journalist. He's just a guy working a job. And today, we are going to dive into the story of that specific job. We're looking at the short-lived, explosive existence of a newspaper called the Rheinische Zeitung, or the Rhine Gazette.
And this isn't just some, biographical footnote or trivia for a dinner party. This is a real origin story. It's the story of how a young theorist collided head-on with political reality. It's about how a specific set of conflicts over things as mundane as dead wood on a forest floor and wine harvest statistics transformed a man who just wanted to fix the system into a man who eventually wanted to completely overthrow it.
So our mission for this deep dive is to explore the cracks in the rational state. We're working from a stack of source notes titled Episode 136, Rheinische Zeitung Cracks in the Rational State. And honestly, reading through this material, the drama is palpable.
Oh, it really is.
It's got wealthy backers, government censors constantly looking over shoulders, and a young editor who just could not keep his mouth shut.
To really understand the stakes here, though, we have to set the context properly.
Right, paint the picture.
Okay, so it's Prussia, 1842. This is not a modern democracy. There's no free press as we know it today. It's a monarchy with incredibly strict censorship. But there is this massive tension in the air. Industrialization is just starting to take hold. Steam engines are firing up. New ideas are moving across borders. And people are starting to ask questions that the king really does not want to answer.
So let's unpack this roadmap. We're going to cover the founding of this paper, Marx's battles with the censors, a very specific law about stealing wood that totally changed his worldview, which is kind of the key pivot point of the whole thing, and the eventual banning of the newspaper.
It's essentially a roadmap of disillusionment, but does start with very high hopes.
Let's start with the setup, the Rheinische Zeitung. Because when I hear Marx in newspaper, I automatically assume it was some underground revolutionary pamphlet printed in a damp basement somewhere.
Handed out in secret by guys in trench coats.
Exactly. But looking at the source material, that was not the case at all.
No, quite the opposite, actually. This was a legitimate, high-profile venture. It was founded in Cologne on January 1st, 1842. It had nice offices, it had a real budget, and if you look at the shareholder list, the people actually paying the bills, it's shocking, given what we know about Marx later in life.
Who are we talking about here? Who was signing the checks?
The backers were the liberal bourgeoisie of the Rhineland.
The liberal bourgeoisie. So we're talking about the rich guys.
We are absolutely talking about the rich guys.
Yeah.
Industrial capitalists, wealthy merchants, bankers, high-powered lawyers. These were men of serious status and property. They were the 1% of Cologne.
That seems incredibly counterintuitive. Why would a bunch of wealthy capitalists hire a young radical like Marx to run their paper? It sounds like hiring the fox to guard the hen house. Or, I don't know, like a tech billionaire today hiring an outright socialist to run their PR department.
Well, you have to look at it through the lens of 1842, not the lens of the Cold War. Their goals actually aligned, at least temporarily.
How so?
These wealthy backers felt totally stifled by the Prussian monarchy. They wanted economic freedom. They wanted to modernize Prussia. They want constitutional reform so they could run their businesses without all this old feudal interference.
Okay, I see. So they weren't revolutionaries trying to dumb the whole system down. They were just looking for liberalization within the system. They wanted to open up the market.
Exactly. They wanted a newspaper that would argue for a modern, rational society where business could thrive. They wanted a really sharp voice to push back against the old feudal aristocracy and the church. And Marx, he was the sharpest voice around. He was a brilliant writer, he was aggressive, and he was completely fearless.
So they basically wanted a weapon to use against the king. And they thought, hey, this kid is smart, let's point him at the monarchy.
A weapon of intellect, yes. And that's exactly where Marx comes in. Now, he didn't start as the editor right off the bat, but he took over as the de facto editor in October of 1842. And this is a crucial nuance we have to nail down for you listening. At this specific moment in time, Marx is what the notes call an internal reformer of the rational state.
An internal reformer of the rational state. That sounds very academic. Let's break that down. What does that actually mean in plain English?
It means he was a Hegelian. He was a devout follower of the philosopher Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel. Now, I promise we don't need a full philosophy seminar here to get this.
Thank you.
But the core idea is this. Hegel believed that the state with a capital S was the realization of reason in history.
The state is reason. That sounds surprisingly optimistic, almost naive.
It is very optimistic. To Marx, at this age, the state wasn't just a government or a sprawling bureaucracy. It wasn't just tax collectors and police officers. It was almost a spiritual entity. It was the physical embodiment of logic and morality in the real world. It was supposed to be the neutral arbiter that looked out for absolutely everyone.
So he actually thought the government was good.
He thought the idea of the state was good. He believed that if there were problems like censorship or blatant injustice, it was because the state just wasn't living up to its own potential. It was like a computer program with a bug in it. His goal wasn't to smash the computer. It was to debug the code. He wanted to use logic and reason to remind the state of its true, rational nature.
That is incredibly idealistic. It sounds like he thought he could literally just debate the government into being better. Like, hey, King, you're being illogical right now. Please stop it.
That is exactly what he thought. He genuinely believed in the power of the argument. He thought, if I can just show them the logical contradiction in their actions, they will be forced to correct it. He thought reason was irresistible. And that brings us perfectly to his first major conflict with the paper, which was censorship.
Right, because if you're running a newspaper in Prussia in 1842, censorship isn't just some abstract concept. It's literally a guy sitting in your office with a red pen scratching things out. How did Marx handle this? Did he try to be subtle? Did he use, clever metaphor?
Marx, subtle. Never. No. He engaged in a full-blown philosophical battle against the very concept of censorship. And his argument is fascinating because it relies entirely on that rational state idea we were just talking about.
Walk us through the logic there. How do you use the state's own logic against it?
So Marx argued that if the state is truly rational, it should trust reason. It shouldn't fear ideas. He said that censorship is actually a sign of the state's self-distrust.
Oh, I like that. It's like telling a bully, if you're so strong, why are you so afraid of what I have to say?
Precisely. He's holding a mirror right up to the government. He wrote this brilliant line where he compares the censor to a doctor. He says the government treats the people like they are sick, and the censor is the doctor deciding what information is quote-unquote healthy for them.
Wow.
But Marx argues that a free people should be treated as adults, not patients. He's basically saying, you claim to be the embodiment of reason, yet you act like a frightened child silencing your critics.
But he's still arguing from within the system at this point. He's saying, you are failing your own standards. He's not saying down with the state. He's saying, be a better state.
Yes, exactly. He's highlighting the paradox. He truly believed at this stage that the state could be convinced. He thought if he could just show the state its own hypocrisy, it would self-correct. He's acting as that debugger for the software of the state. He thinks the hardware is totally fine.
But then the debugging stops working. The screen goes blue.
Correct. The glitch turns out to be a feature. And this happens when we get to the woods.
The wood. Okay, this is the part of the notes that I found the most surprising. We move from this high-level, lofty philosophy about censorship and freedom of the press to fallen branches in a forest. This is the turning point mentioned in the outline.
This is the moment where theory violently crashes into reality. It's known historically as the debates on the wood theft laws.
Set the scene for us. Why is the Prussian parliament spending its time debating sticks? It seems so incredibly minor.
It seems minor to us now, but it was literal life or death for the poor back then. You have to understand the massive transition happening in the economy. For centuries, under old feudal custom, it had been a recognized right for poor peasants to go into the forests and gather Rotholz. Right, that's the German term. It basically means dead wood that had already fallen from the trees.
So it's trash wood. It's just sitting on the ground. Nobody is going in and chopping down fresh trees. It's just debris.
Exactly. But they used it for fuel to heat their homes and cook their food. It was absolutely crucial for their survival, especially in the freezing winters. And for generations, it was seen as common property, or at least property that no one wealthy really cared about. But as industrialization ramps up, suddenly wood becomes much more valuable.
Oh, right, because you need it for the factories.
Right. It's fuel for steam engines, it's charcoal for steel production. It suddenly has a real price tag attached to it.
So the value of the asset goes up, and suddenly the owners care about the scraps they used to ignore?
And the private landowners, the aristocrats, and the new industrial capitalists, they wanted to monetize their forests completely. They wanted every single scrap of wood to be accounted for and sold. So the parliament proposed a law that would classify gathering fallen branches as actual theft.
So picking up a stick off the ground is now legally the exact same thing as breaking into someone's house and stealing their silver.
Legally, yes. And it wasn't just a label. The state would actually use its police, its courts, and its wardens to actively prosecute these peasants, all to protect the quote-unquote property of the forest owners.
And Marx is watching all of this happen. He's reporting on the proceedings of the parliament. He's sitting there listening to these politicians debate this. How does he react to that?
This shakes him to his absolute core. Remember, he firmly believes the state is the universal protector of reason. It's supposed to look out for the good of the whole society, rich and poor alike. It's supposed to be the neutral referee in the game of life. But here, he sees the referee actively tackling the players. He sees the state acting effectively as a private security guard for the rich.
It's not being neutral at all. It's picking a side.
It's picking the side of private property over the basic survival of the poor. And the arguments these politicians were making were purely about protecting the rights of the owners. They did not care at all that people would freeze to death. This is the big aha moment for him. Marx realizes that the state isn't just making a mistake here. It's not just a glitch in the code.
What does he see it as then? Because this seems like the pivotal moment where the quote-unquote old Marx we started with begins to form.
He starts to see a structure, and the source notes emphasize this heavily. Marx didn't just think, oh, these are a few bad politicians making a bad law. He started to think, wait a minute, maybe the rational state isn't impartial at all. Maybe the state is actually embedded inside the structure of private property ownership.
That is a massive mental shift. Before, he thought the state was up here, floating above everything, pure and rational. Now he's realizing the state is down in the mud, deeply entangled with who owns what.
Precisely. He begins to really suspect that the universal reason he worshipped was basically a fiction. The state wasn't betraying reason, it was just serving property, the whole apparatus, the police, the courts, the laws. It was all designed to protect the interests of the forest owners, even if it meant freezing peasants.
That's a heavy realization for a guy who just wanted to write some clever articles about freedom of speech. It sounds like the software debugger realized the operating system itself was malware.
That's a great analogy, actually. He realized the system wasn't broken. It was working exactly as designed, just not for the people he thought it was designed for. It was built to protect assets, not people. And it wasn't just the wood theft issue either. The sources mention another example that really drove this home for him, which was the Mosel wine farmers.
Yes, the Mosel region. This was kind of his home turf, right?
Pretty close to it, yeah. Marx reported on the plight of these wine farmers in the Moselle Valley. They were suffering terribly due to shifting economic conditions, new tariffs, and heavy competition. They were just going bankrupt left and right. And once again, the government was totally unresponsive.
But here it wasn't just pure malice like the wood law, was it? It was more about bureaucracy.
Right. Marx wrote a series of articles showing how the bureaucratic hierarchy actually prevented the government from even seeing the problem. The later officials didn't want to report bad news up the chain because they thought it made them look incompetent. And the higher officials up top just assumed the laws were perfect, so the suffering of the farmers was completely invisible to the state.
So the all-knowing rational state was actually blind?
Blind and deaf. It was like the state was wearing a headset that only played the Everything is Fine song, while the farmers were literally screaming for help. And this realization forced him to change his writing style completely. He moved away from purely political criticism.
Like talking about constitutional rights and censorship concepts.
Right, he moved from that to economic criticism. He realized he had to talk about property, class interests, tariffs, and poverty.
So he's sliding. He's sliding from being a political liberal to, well, something else entirely.
He is sliding from political critique toward economic critique. But, and I really cannot stress this enough, he is still not a communist at this point.
Right.
He hasn't read the French socialists yet. He doesn't have a theory of the proletariat. He's just a really smart guy looking at the machinery of the state and realizing, hey, this doesn't work the way the manual says it should.
He's diagnosing the illness, but he doesn't have the cure yet.
That's a perfect way to put it. He's seeing the symptoms, the censorship, the wood theft laws, the extreme poverty, and he's realizing the underlying condition is totally structural. But he hasn't prescribed the medication yet. He just knows the patient is way sicker than he originally thought.
Okay, so he's writing all of this in the Rheinische Zeitung. He's attacking the censorship. He's attacking the property laws. He's aggressively standing up for the poor. The liberal bourgeoisie backers, the guys actually paying the bills, they must be getting incredibly nervous. I mean, they wanted lower taxes, not a revolution.
Oh, they were definitely sweating. They wanted reform, sure. They wanted better trade laws. They absolutely did not want a crusade against private property rights. They were property owners themselves, after all. And the government. The government was absolutely furious. The Prussian authorities were simply not going to tolerate this indefinitely.
So what did the government actually do? Did they just storm in and arrest him?
Not immediately, no. They played a bit of a cat-and-mouse game first. They increased censorship drastically. They started sending specific government censors to the newspaper office every single night to review the proofs before they could print. It became this exhausting battle of attrition. They demanded that the paper change its tone. They actually demanded a change of editor, directly trying to pressure the backers to fire Marx.
The classic tone it down or else warning. Just be reasonable, Carl.
Exactly. But Marx wouldn't tone it down. If anything, he got sharper. He was radicalized by the conflict itself. He was practically poking the bear every single day. So eventually the hammer fell. In January of 1843, the official decision was made to ban the paper entirely.
Wow, that was fast. He only started as the de facto editor in October of 1842.
It was incredibly fast. The paper was officially abolished on March 31st, 1843. Marx actually resigned shortly before the very end on March 17th.
Why did he resign before the doors closed?
Probably as a last-ditch effort to try and save the paper. He likely thought, well, if I leave, maybe they'll let the paper survive under someone else. But it was totally futile. The government wanted the whole operation gone.
So his actual tenure as the boss was only about 5 months.
Just 5 months. But you could easily argue those 5 months were some of the most important in modern history.
Because of what it did to his brain.
Because of the ideological transformation it forced. Let's synthesize what actually happened here. This period is known as the Rheinische Zeitung affair. And it wasn't one single event. It was a rapid series of collisions with the state.
Right. He went in as the updater. He thought, I'll just patch the software.
And he came out as the critic of the narrative. He realized that the state narrative, this comforting story that the government's there for everyone, was just a lie.
The source notes use a really interesting phrase for this. They say the footing of the rational state collapsed for him.
Yes, that is the perfect visualization. Imagine you're standing on a floor that you believe is solid rock. You're stomping on it, you're testing it, you completely trust it. That's the rational state in his mind. Then you look down through a tiny crack and realize it's actually rotten wood, and it's only held together by private interests and property laws.
And the floor just gives way.
Exactly. The floor gives way. That is exactly what happened to Karl Marx in 1843.
So he falls through the floor. Where does he land?
That's the really fascinating thing. He lands in a void.
A void?
Yeah, at this specific moment when he walks out of that newspaper office in Cologne for the very last time. He is in a massive ideological transition. He has totally lost his faith in the liberal state. He knows that internal reform is impossible because the structure itself is designed to prevent it. But he doesn't yet have the massive theory of communism to replace it.
So he's politically homeless?
He really is. He knows exactly what he is against. He's against the hypocrisy of the pseudo-universal state. He's against things like the wood theft laws. But he doesn't quite know what he is for yet. He's leaving Prussia, he's heading into exile, and he's carrying this massive question mark with him.
And I'm guessing that question mark is what drives him to Paris.
Exactly right. He moves to Paris, which at the time was the absolute hotbed of radical thought in Europe. There, he finally meets the working class face to face. He reads the French socialists. He finds the answers to the questions that were raised back in Cologne. But without the Rheinische Zeitung, without that specific job, without the gritty fight over the Woodtheft laws, he might have remained just a brilliant, slightly annoying liberal philosopher. It was the hard contact with reality, the contact with the property structure, that fully radicalized him.
It is genuinely amusing to think that if the Prussian government had just let those poor peasants pick up some sticks, modern history might have been totally different.
I mean, it's a simplification, but there is real truth to it. It highlights just how fragile high-minded philosophy is when it finally hits the hard ground of economic survival. You can be a great Hegelian philosopher sitting comfortably in the library, but when you watch a guy getting arrested and thrown in jail for picking up kindling, the philosophy falls apart. The universal spirit doesn't keep your family warm at night. Wood does.
So let's wrap this up. We started with the image of young Marx in a nice suit, thinking he could fix the world with a really good editorial.
And we end with a deeply disillusioned man who realizes that the pen alone isn't going to be enough when the laws are being written by the people who own the forest.
The key takeaway for me here is the sheer power of specificity. We so often think of massive political changes happening because of big, abstract ideas floating in the ether. But here, it was specific, on-the-ground reporting, seeing exactly how a mundane law affected a guy freezing in the woods. And that is what dismantled an entire philosophical system.
Absolutely. It teaches us that you really can't understand the state or politics just by reading their constitutions or listening to their grand speeches. You have to look at where the rubber meets the road. You have to look at who is getting arrested and for what. You have to look at the harsh economic reality operating right beneath the political mask.
Which brings us to a final thought for you listening. And this is something to really chew on after the deep dive ends.
Right. Because Marx realized that the universal state was actually just a mask for specific economic interests. It claimed to be perfectly neutral, but structurally, it was deeply biased.
So here's the question. Where do we see that today? Where else do we see modern institutions that claim to be neutral, that claim to serve everyone equally, but when you really look at the structure underneath, they're actually serving a hidden structural purpose?
It's the big question of the structure behind the narrative. And once you start looking for it, just like Marx did with the wood, you might not be able to stop seeing it.
Leaving you with a little bit of paranoia to end the deep dive. Thank you so much for walking us through this. It was fascinating.
Oh, my pleasure entirely.
And thank you for listening. Keep looking for the cracks in the rational state. We'll see you next time.
This program is provided by Universal Genesis.